Welcome back, everyone. So glad you're here for this human nutrition module. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly, absolutely crucial topic in sports science. We're looking at the exact intersection of nutrition, hormonal balance, and athletic training. Basically, we're going to explore what literally happens to the human body when it's pushed to its absolute physical limits, but without the fuel it needs to keep going. Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The cost of intense training, 2. The female athlete triad, 3. Severe health consequences, 4. The Reds paradigm shift, and finally, 5. The male athlete triad.
Now, you all just wrapped up a module diving deep into the psychology behind common and uncommon eating disorders. So, you've got a solid grasp on the mental and behavioral drivers, right? Well, today, we need to bridge that gap. We're zeroing in strictly on the physiological fallout. What actually goes down inside an athlete's body when disordered eating practices collide with the massive metabolic demands of intense training. Spoiler alert, the breakdown is systematic, and it is severe.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the cost of intense training.
I want you to picture an elite athlete's body like a high-performance engine. Think of a high-end sports car. When you race that car at top speed, it burns through a staggering amount of fuel. And if you don't refill the tank, well, the car doesn't just casually slow down. Eventually, the whole engine seizes up. And that is exactly the core issue we're unpacking today, the physiological complications that pop up when energy intake completely fails to meet the metabolic demands of intense physical training. When an athlete's body is forced to literally run on empty, it goes into full-blown survival mode. It starts shutting down non-essential physiological functions just to keep the lights on.
Moving right along to Section 2, the female athlete triad.
For decades, sports medicine focused pretty much entirely on this one specific model. The female athlete triad is a clinical condition that's characterized by the really complex interrelationship between three things: energy availability, menstrual function, and bone mineral density. And what's super fascinating here is just how intimately linked these three seemingly totally separate systems actually are. A deficit in the kitchen doesn't just stay in the kitchen. It directly impacts reproductive health and literally the structural integrity of the athlete's skeleton.
It's basically a biological domino effect. Step 1 is low energy availability. This is a negative caloric balance where the athlete just isn't eating enough to support their body's basic baseline functions, especially once you account for the massive energy cost of their training. So that first domino falls, and it knocks right into the second, menstrual disturbances. This usually shows up as amenorrhea, which is the complete absence of a menstrual cycle. And then, bam, that leads directly to step 3, reduced bone mineral density. The skeleton actually physically weakens because of the lack of nutrients and the major hormonal crash.
So who's actually at risk here? Well, honestly, any athlete can fall into this trap, but sports that heavily prioritize a low body mass definitely act as a huge catalyst. We're talking about gymnastics, dance, cheerleading, and distance running. In these environments, there's often this incredibly intense and sometimes totally unspoken pressure to stay as light as humanly possible, just to execute that perfect leap or, run a slightly faster split. That exact combination of aesthetic and performance pressure creates the perfect storm where low energy availability just takes root.
All right, let's transition into Section 3, severe health consequences.
The truly dangerous health consequences of this triad all stem straight from that initial state of low energy availability. It triggers a massive systemic cascade. First off, like you learned in the last module, female athletes in these low energy states have a statistically much higher risk of falling into disordered eating practices, which of course just deepens that energy deficit. But biologically speaking, the absolute critical link here is the second point, hormonal imbalance. Specifically, we're talking about estrogen deficiency. Without enough fuel, the body literally stops producing enough estrogen. And since estrogen is highly protective of bone health, this leads straight to point number 3, severe skeletal degradation. And this is a huge takeaway for your clinical knowledge, so definitely flag this. If this combination of poor nutrition and low estrogen is just left untreated, a 20-year-old athlete can literally develop premature osteoporosis. They can end up with the fragile, porous bones of someone decades older. The risk for totally devastating stress fractures absolutely skyrockets. We're not talking about a sprained ankle here. This is permanent, lifelong structural damage, all caused by a simple lack of fuel.
Thankfully, our scientific understanding has evolved quite a bit. Section 4, the Reds paradigm shift.
So, like we said, historically, sports medicine zoomed in really tightly on the female athlete triad. But recently, science has zoomed out. Now, we use a much broader model called REDS, which stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. This is the modern paradigm shift. Pay attention to that word relative, it's key. It acknowledges that the deficiency is relative to the extreme, specific energy demands of the athlete. And even more importantly, REDS is completely gender neutral, recognizing that this has a far broader systemic impact than just reproductive and bone health.
The crucial thing to understand is that rest changes the entire conversation. It definitely occurs in both male and female athletes. And it doesn't just mess with menstruation. It affects almost every single system in the human body. We're talking immunological, metabolic, cardiovascular, you name it, it's impacted. It absolutely wrecks long-term physical health, but here's the kicker for the athletes themselves. It completely degrades their immediate athletic performance. An athlete dealing with rest is going to see their strength, endurance, and recovery times just plummet. It's this tragic irony, a condition that destroys their health while wiping out the exact competitive edge they were trying to gain.
And that perfectly tees up our final section, 5, the male athlete triad. Researchers have absolutely confirmed that the exact same core issue, low energy availability, creates a completely parallel condition in men. The mechanism is clear. Low energy availability in men drives reproductive suppression and low bone density. Kind of sounds familiar, right? It's the exact same physiological fallout we just looked at in the female model, it's just manifesting in male biology. The male body, when it's starved of energy, downregulates testosterone production, which then directly weakens the skeletal structure.
So, what exactly puts male athletes at risk? Well, we see extreme training loads, usually combined with intense body dissatisfaction. A really common early warning sign is frequent, totally unexplained injuries. Clinically, there's also a strong correlation with a history of depression or anxiety. But honestly, perhaps the most dangerous risk factor of all is that very last point, the completely false but widespread belief that weight loss automatically equals better athletic performance. These athletes are essentially starving themselves because they think it'll make them faster or stronger, when physiologically, it's literally tearing their bodies apart from the inside out.
We've definitely covered some really heavy, complex, physiological ground in this explainer. We've seen exactly how a negative caloric balance can completely break down the skeletal and hormonal systems of both male and female athletes. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one absolutely crucial question to chew on. If REDS and these triads compromise both long-term health and immediate performance across all genders, how do we actually stop it? How do we fuel the engine the right way? Well, that is exactly what you're going to explore in your next required module, which is entirely focused on the prevention and treatment of these dangerous energy-deficient states. Keep all this physiology fresh in your minds, and I will see you in the next lesson.